Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm here with Jessica Ahlquist. Hey, Jessica, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for being here today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, for any viewers who might not be familiar with your story, if you can kind of give a brief outline of kind of what made you famous and um, the incident
Famous is
that
a stretch. Infamous, maybe in small circles.
in certain
And
circles,
locally.
maybe. Right.
Yeah. So basically, when I was 16, I was in high school, and I ended up filing a lawsuit against my city because they had a school prayer displayed in my school that they refused to take down. And as an atheist, I complained about it and I had advocated for its removal for a long time. And the school refused to take it down. So I ended up working with the American Civil Liberties Union. We filed a lawsuit and I eventually won that lawsuit in 2012. As I said, it's been about 10 years now. Um, and it was not easy, obviously, as you can expect. Saying that you're an atheist publicly is usually something that can bring out a lot of animosity from total strangers. So I had my life threatened. I was, you know, really the center of a ton of attacks locally. Police had to be involved. I was escorted to my classes for a period of time by police officers. It was a scary time in my life, but it was worth it. Everything that happened was definitely worth it. Winning that lawsuit and um, eventually having them take that prayer down. Yeah, it was a win for secular people everywhere, I think.
Yeah. What was your initial motivation to take action to get into litigation over it? What motivated you? What kind of was that spark that you thought I need to take a stand and do something?
Yeah, I mean, it started. I had seen it. A friend had noticed it and was like, "Hey, did you know there was a prayer there?" And I went to check it out, and I was really confused. I think I was a freshman when I first saw it, and I was familiar with the First Amendment a little bit, and I didn't believe in God by the time I was 15. And I sort of didn't know what to think. I was sort of confused. My gut instinct told me that it was against the law, but I also thought, well, if my school has it here, it can't possibly be against the law, right? So it was towards the end of the year that I had seen this prayer in the school, and so I spent the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of high school, just sort of doing some research and just sort of learning about First Amendment cases and other issues where or other precedent involving school prayer. And so it really just started off as curiosity when I had seen it, and then it got to a point where I was pretty confident that this was illegal. And I had basically made the decision that when school started in the fall, I wanted to talk to somebody, maybe the principal. I wasn't exactly sure who to talk to. And I had made that decision, but coincidentally, that it's quite a remarkable coincidence because it had been up for over 50 years. But that summer, a parent who was attending an event in the school gets rented out for different purposes over the summer. They had noticed the prayer and they had actually sent a letter to the ACLU. The ACLU then sent a letter to the city saying, hey, it's come to our attention that this prayer is in the school and you need to take it down because it's illegal. And so I had read an article, a newspaper article about that exchange, about the fact that the city was going to have to consider taking this down because of a letter from the ACLU.
Right.
And it was at that point that I said, oh, good. Well, I guess I don't have to worry about it then. I guess I don't have to do anything. The one thing I did do at that point was I started a Facebook page um, called something like Support the Removal of the Cranston West banner. I don't think it's still active, but regardless, at the time, I was pretty much the only person in the group for like a long time.
Right.
I just wanted to show support for the issue. But it didn't take off until after the city started having meetings to discuss what their options were, which they didn't really have any options. It was illegal. But they were,
So so your initial motivation was just kind of like, this is not, I don't think this is legal. Were there like logical or emotional um motivations for you? Like, I think this is kind of not fair. It makes people I remember at one point in some interview I saw of yours, you had like a Jewish friend that you thought it made them they said it made them uncomfortable because
yeah.
Kevin's kind of
Um, I
Christian.
think I think for me, being secular, um, I don't find the existence of religion offensive. What I found offensive was this idea that it represented the school, that
Right.
it was something that was titled school prayer, and it started, "Our Heavenly Father, comma, grant us each day the
Right.
desire," and I don't remember all the words, but it definitely felt like it was representative of the entire student body, or at least it should be. And that was
Right.
actually part of our legal argument, was that it was exclusionary in a public school. It was showing favor to kids who did have religion or had particularly Christian religion. Um, and although we weren't forced to say it, I think its presence and the fact that we were forced to be there, it was offensive. It's offensive that I would have to, you know, be in a public school where I have certain rights and they're just being violated. So, I mean, it's hard to say exactly. I guess that's kind of why I explain the initial just curiosity that I had about it, because what something told me it was wrong, and I discovered that it was illegal.
Right.
And
It,
I think part of the motivation that came to see it through to the end was the fact that they said no, was that I had asked them to please respect my rights, and they said no. And I think it was at
right.
that point that I realized this is bigger than just something on the wall. This is a matter of defending my rights as an American.
Yeah. So if you were to kind of give a speech to somebody on the, say, the religious right that would call you intolerant yourself, right? Why can't you just tolerate that? Nobody, like you said, is forcing you to do anything. That would kind of be the crux of your argument when it's about fairness and inclusion and not having something in a space that's supposed to represent everybody, whether it be, public anything, right? Especially where taxpayers' monies are involved. It's just not tolerable. And that and like you said, it's also a legal issue. And it ties back to the founding of the country.
Right.
What that would pretty much. So if you were to give a speech, like what would it be? I'm sure it would include like if you were to if just imagine like some religious person was telling you, that kind of thing. What is your problem? Like, why are you so intolerant? Why is this a big deal? Why did you endure this? Did you engage in this?
Well, yeah, exactly that, right? Exactly that. So, I mean, who would question a religious person's motivation to defend their right to pray? Absolutely no one. I mean, the importance that that has, the right that you have in this country to believe what you believe, free,
Right.
you know, of
But they would say
perceiving.
nobody's telling you what to believe. They would say this is us expressing our beliefs and nobody's
Well,
forcing you.
freedom of religion includes freedom from religion. I want to go to
Right.
school and I want to not have my public school where my secular parents, taxpayer money goes to, fund this school. I would like for them to not be boldly stating on the wall that I'm not part of their student body. In fact, not
Right.
just me, but anyone who doesn't identify with that belief in God. And it there's a lot of interesting historical elements to the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was actually written originally by a student, and that was one of the arguments the city tried to use legally was that it shouldn't be considered something that's being endorsed by the school. It's not a state sponsorship of religion or an endorsement of religion. It was actually student artwork. Of course, my
Right.
lawyers pointed out there's no signature on it. In a school full of student artwork, there is nothing that makes this clearly student artwork, just like the rest of student artwork in the school clearly
Right.
is labeled as such. This, in fact, is labeled school prayer. I mean, there are a lot of huge issues with arguments that the city tried to bring, and the actual court case itself, Ahlquist v. City of Cranston, is a really interesting read if you haven't read it or if you want to learn more about First Amendment issues and specifically prayer in school. The judge who heard my case was really brilliant. At one point, he actually asked the city's lawyers when they tried to argue that it wasn't really a prayer, it was just a historical thing. The judge asked him, would you be saying that if it were a Hindu prayer or a Buddhist prayer?
Hmm.
And I mean, he
They
could
want it
see
down.
right through it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know that the lawyers that were there defending the city pro bono were there from a religious organization, a
And there's the
Christian
majority
organization.
argument, right? Oh, the majority of us subscribe to this, but the thing about a republic is you protect the minority, right? Because you
Exactly.
could be in the minority at some point, right? And speaking of history, I mean, there's a lot of historical arguments you can make there too, right? Anytime any religion has had political power, it's kind of been a hell on earth, really, right?
Oh my God,
So
yeah.
um, also the founding of the country, and I know a lot about the founders. I mean, I have many books. I've done podcasts about them with writers who have written about them, and definitely Thomas Jefferson comes to mind, obviously, with his the wall separating church and state line, and James Madison talking about, if you exclude one religion, you could exclude one sect of Christians using the same logic, right? So where does it end, right? You have to,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I
but
mean, Rhode
definitely.
Island, where I'm from, where this case happened, is generally thought of being a pretty liberal place. And the irony, of course, is that Rhode Island is the only state in the entire country that was, I mean, the country was founded, for religious freedom in large part. I mean, there's a lot that went into the founding.
Mhm.
But specifically, Rhode Island was founded because Roger Williams was kicked out of Massachusetts. And he went to Rhode Island to specifically find a place that he could practice. And it was nicknamed Rogues Island. So it's ironic that all these years later, we've apparently just completely forgotten our state's history.
Yeah, there does seem to be some general backsliding on a lot of things nowadays. I'm a big Steven Pinker fan, um, but in recent time, I mean, his argument is not that there's not like fluctuations, but it's kind of an overall thing, right? Overall trajectory. But in recent years, there has been a lot of like backsliding on various fronts. Um, which brings me to the next kind of question I had for you. What do you think about the state of the world now, the state of secularism now? Because like for me, I don't know if you're into, like, for example, comes to mind, Korean entertainment. I've gotten into Korean entertainment. That's generally considered a pretty secular country, majority non-believers, right? But if you watch a lot of media, you'll see like crosses everywhere, and you don't even realize. I didn't realize how big Christianity was there. Here in Tennessee, where I am, they're trying to get like Bible passages on public school walls. I think they did. I don't remember. I mean, it's insane. So,
Yeah.
what do you?
No,
I mean, we're definitely in the most secular time in history, in every regard. But still, what? How do you gauge things? I guess since this incident, where do you think we're at?
yeah, this is so interesting. I find myself thinking about this a lot lately, especially having taken a step back from it, basically
Yeah.
to finish growing up and figure out who I was independently of all that stuff. So it's kind of like now that I'm coming back to it, it's really interesting to see ways it's changed. Um, I have been lucky enough to like meet a ton of these, Steven Pinker, for example, and Richard Dawkins, and it's really interesting how socially things have changed. Also, in certain ways. We, in the time since I filed my lawsuit and won, um, we had the end of Obama and the beginning of Trump, and I think that has permanently changed everything. I
It's
mean,
kind of the elephant in the room regarding that question, right?
exactly. I mean, Trump being president was earth shattering. I mean, nothing, people who used to tell me, hey, I get that you're technically right, but how is it worth it, right? Like, who
Hmm.
cares? You know, like, who
Right,
cares? Like, the country's not in peril, right? Whatever. Like, I guess I agree with you. I'm not even religious, but like, is it really worth it, everything that you're going through now? And it's like, now that Trump has happened, I find far fewer people having that mentality.
right.
Not to say I
Yeah.
told you so, but like, do you see why it matters that you defend your rights when you have them violate? I mean, it's a slippery slope, right? Next thing you know, you could be losing your right to vote at all. You could be losing democracy.
It's
So,
like, hey, I got this illustration right in front of you for you to see why it was important. Obviously,
yeah.
how easily it can slide one thing after another, domino effect to who knows where, right?
Oh yeah, and I'm not someone who's like, I want to be clear. The Constitution is not perfect. The Constitution, like, I'm not,
Yeah,
a Second Amendment person really. So it's like, you could
yeah.
criticize me for that, say that that's, but I believe that the Constitution is a living, breathing document, just like the Constitution says that it is. And includes a clause. Well, you'll have to excuse Cosmo.
Is that
He,
an animal?
yeah, this is
Oh,
Cosmo.
I didn't see it at first. I was like, is that a hand?
Yeah, no, he was napping, I think, in the sun. So
Got it.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've read The Founding Myth by Andrew Seidel.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. No, I
yeah,
love Andrew. He's great.
yeah. I had him on my channel back in 2020. Yeah, he was very informative. That book is great.
Yeah, no,
So,
he's
yeah,
awesome. He's a great writer, and I've known him now for 10 years at least.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so he's doing amazing work, and I love the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
yeah.
Um,
I saw you on there maybe a year ago. You were on,
yeah, has
so
it already been a
I think
year? Wow. Yeah.
I saw the video recently in preparation for this, and I think it said 2021 April. I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah. But getting into you in regards to religion a little more kind of on a personal level to end things here. Um, why did you leave religion in the first place? Like, were there any specific like key things that led you there, or how did that happen?
So, I mean, I did not have this dramatic losing my religion that a lot of people do.
Right.
I was, I guess, technically born and raised Catholic, but like Catholic light. Like, I was never read the Bible. Okay, we didn't go to church really except for, mass. I don't even think we didn't go to Easter. We didn't do anything like that. I went to an Armenian church as a kid. They didn't
Wow.
really speak English even. So I don't think my mom really even understood the point in bringing us there. It was more just a cultural and, just having extended family that would go. I
Right.
would just go for that reason. I don't think my parents were ever traditional. They never taught me religion in any kind of a preachy, this is what we believe, this is the truth of the universe. And, you know, again, they never read me the Bible. So I didn't have this sort of idea that it was wrong to say, well, what if God doesn't exist? Which I find a lot of people who were raised very fundamentally, they do. Um,
Right.
they almost like, I have to ask at this point, were you raised religious?
You're asking if I was?
Yeah.
Um. Oh well. So my parents are divorced. On my dad's side, he knows Ted Cruz and has been to his house. He supports Trump. He's been to DC to support all of those people. My mom is kind of a liberal Christian, although when I really started finding out about religion, maybe 9 years ago, I kept throwing things at her and she got tired of it. I kept saying, "Did you know this? Did you know this? Did you know this?" And she's like, "I don't want to hear it anymore." And you know, a few years ago, I tried to go to a. It's the last time I've been to a church. Actually, I went to hers for Mother's Day, and I thought it'd be a pretty innocuous, sermon, but nope. One of the things, and I have a book that I published with Atheist Republic, and this made it in the book. What the pastor said: "Those who don't embrace Jesus will burn your life to the ground." On a Mother's Day
Okay.
sermon, I'm like, what? I haven't been back. There's so
Yeah.
many things wrong with it. So, I mean, that's briefly my background there. So you were
Yeah, I mean,
lucky
I'm
in that
asking
regard.
because
uh,
no, it's like one of the most interesting things I feel for secular people to talk about is like their background, right? Like how they ended up in the
mhm.
community because very few people were born into it, so to speak.
Yeah,
So it's like very hard for me to describe where on the spectrum I fall. I feel like most of the people that I've spoken with, come to this community because they had been very much indoctrinated at one point, very religious
and at some point they
family.
just started investigating and different
Yeah,
things. Yeah,
yeah. And I almost feel like my story isn't interesting enough in that capacity. Like, my parents were very much just kind of my
mm,
dad doesn't believe in God. My dad identifies as an atheist. He's the person who allowed me to go forward with the lawsuit. He was because I was only 16, I was a child.
right.
My dad was when my case was titled Ahlquist v. City of Cranston. They're talking about my dad also, who was technically the plaintiff, or at least sort of signed on so that I could be one. Um, and so he
Mm.
he definitely identifies as an atheist. My mom, again, not at all traditional. I was raised that the best thing that I could do was ask lots of questions. I was never, if I said,
Again, lucky
well,
you.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
that's
That's
key.
the
You're
thing.
asking questions, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I was raised well. I was raised by, people who encouraged me to think for myself and to
But when
think
you were
critically.
thinking for yourself, were there any specific things that really kind of that you remember were key for you, and like you deciding or real coming to the conclusion, no, I don't subscribe to this at all.
Yes. So I'm saying that my parents weren't religious because I do frequently read things where I feel like it's a little bit misrepresented, like how religious I was at any point. I had a loose belief in God. So I guess that's basically what my parents taught me, was just a vague sort of God created the world.
Right.
Um, when I was about 10, my mom started having some mental health issues that as a 10-year-old I did not understand at all.
Mm.
And it was really scary and upsetting. And, just family stuff, family issues that were happening in my life, for the first time made me actually try praying. Because I mean, until that point, I really didn't have anything. No one close to me had ever been sick or had died or anything like that. And so I just never really thought to do it. I never really had anything to pray about. And so it was the first time that I actually thought, oh, maybe I should do this. Um, and it was at that point that I started having a bit of guilt, and these feelings sort of started to spiral. So it started off just curious, would this work? Let me try praying. And then it didn't work. But that feeling of disappointment was also mixed with this feeling of like, okay, well, my mom is doing better today. Was it wrong for me to have asked God to help my family? What if there's somebody who is actually dying? I'm asking for someone to help my mom, but she's not, physically dying. She's having, so there were like a lot of these questions that started to come up. And then I started to think, well, there are people who are dying. There are people die every day. Babies die. And
Mhm.
I couldn't basically put that genie back in the bottle once I
So
had
it
that.
wasn't scientific really or philosophical or anything. You're a kid. Some kids are engaged in that stuff. I guess some are not.
I would
But
say it was philosophical. It was
yeah, I guess you're right. I guess yeah.
a 10-year-old version of it. It
Right.
wasn't because of reading a book or, hearing any kind of official, or not official, but technical, no. I
Hmm.
did learn those things later. I learned
Right.
about, some of the philosophical concepts when it comes to religion, and I've taken classes on it since then. But that was all after the fact. The initial thing was
Yeah.
really just, you know, this doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah.
and the minute I start asking questions, I realize I have far more questions than there are answers. Um, and not just because I was a kid, because there aren't answers to these questions that don't kind of lead you to just say, all right, maybe there is no God then.
Yeah. Definitely. It makes sense that it will start on a personal level, something to do with you and your personal life that is your initial starting point for something like this. Although I do think like religious people, they'll be like so in a bubble, like oh, I feel this, I had this experience, but they don't like break out of that and say, hey, what about these other people's experience? What about these other religions? And they have experiences that are um they are incompatible with what you think, the claims you make about the world, objective claims. So yeah, I definitely do get that.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
one of
I'm
the
sympathetic though to people who feel that way, because I think part of the advantage I had was that I was a kid, right? Like if you make it to a later point in life and then you start thinking to yourself, oh my God, have I spent my entire life
mm,
so far being completely wrong about something? And it almost seems like you'd have more of a reason to push back against that epiphany, because you don't
yeah,
want to believe that you've wasted so much time. Which of
yeah,
course isn't a good way of thinking about it. If anyone is finding themselves feeling that way, that I don't think that that's how you should feel, but I could understand feeling that way. So I do see how I had that advantage.
definitely. One of the things that I never even thought about until like recent years is it doesn't make sense that there's like this disembodied mind that's just outside of time, right? Just existed forever in what space, just kind of alone, I guess bored. I don't know what it was doing forever. I mean, really, you could. It's fascinating how for me, I keep discovering things that don't make sense when I think about them. You know,
There's very few things that do make sense in religion,
yeah,
and those things generally aren't actually religious in nature. They're usually like scientific principles, or just like normal, just basic, obvious morality that religion has just kind of claimed for itself. Most of
yeah,
the stuff that is actually like a unique claim of religion is complete nonsense.
yeah. Was there anything in religion that you find in any way compelling, or that you think is the best thing they have to bring forward, the best argument that they might have?
Like the best argument they have for believing in God, or like the best thing
I
that they
get, yeah.
offer humanity.
I was thinking more belief in God, but because I
I'm
mean
a
that's
sociologist. I always see it from the bigger picture. Um, so that's a really good question, and no one's ever really asked me that. No, there's nothing really. I don't find any of the arguments that I've ever heard for God to be really at all convincing. That could be closed-minded of me, but
mhm,
I've never heard anyone present. Okay, I should be fair. In a philosophical debate setting, I can concede that there are some points that they have that there are no exact philosophical retorts to that can just debunk them perfectly. But I'm not convinced by that. I find that to
you're
just
right.
be,
You're not convinced, but that you would think, okay, this is the best thing they have, and I could see how that might be convincing because there are a few things like when on their face before you dig into them, they might you can understand. Okay, I see how that might be persuasive to somebody, but then when you dig into it, it's not persuasive, right?
right. Yeah.
Kind of like something
And
like where did the universe come from, and things are complicated how they get that way. But once you start, digging into the science and what we know about reality, they don't hold up.
religion doesn't provide any of the answers to those questions. If not really.
Well, it does in a very, very vague way, but not, you know.
Well, saying that God created the universe, it's like, okay, well then where did God come from, right? So I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
this
Yeah,
is
that's
not
true.
there. They don't really provide actual answers the way that they pretend
Yeah.
that they do. They only provide answers if you are willing to stop asking, but why, to a certain at a certain
Hmm.
point, you know.
Very true.
And that's again where I credit my parents. I was told you can ask that endlessly, and you should. Um, we were There's another part of that question though.
You mentioned that there might be an argument why it's beneficial. I think that side of it, and
Yeah,
how
I
it's
guess
kind of
from
more.
the standpoint of like what religion offers humanity, I mean, there's a lot of bad, right? Like a ton of bad, probably more bad than good historically.
I'd say so.
Yeah, but I think that there are also, I mean, to be totally fair, there have also been some really beautiful and amazing things that have happened because of faith. Faith has driven a lot of art. It's driven a lot of
It it happened to have driven it, but it could have been something else. And
exactly, and that's where
oftentimes it's
I
just they had dominion over everything.
yes,
So, you know,
yes, such a good point. I think that's so true. And I've kind of been someone who's long thought about how you can sort of replace that human need for a sense of community,
right.
but in a secular way. So like
But as
back
you
when
said,
I
they don't own that.
no,
That's
exactly, they
that's a
pretend to,
human. Yeah,
they pretend
yeah,
to, but they don't. My
yeah.
morality has never come from religion ever. But
So
like,
which is a good thing for the most part. Okay.
well, yeah, but I mean, I've had people ask me, say, how can you possibly be a good person without believing in God? And it's like, that is, as someone who's, I loosely believe in God, I never found any kind of sense of morality from it. So that is just such a strange question. It's like, how can your belief in God be the reason you're moral? Like, that comes from inside of you, that comes from your interactions with other people.
Hmm.
That to me, that's a very strange question, but I do see where my background gives me a different perspective on that stuff.
So you're
um
studying sociology, you said, or
yeah,
you are?
yeah,
Okay, cool,
and political science.
awesome, awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. Your morality comes from, your reason and your empathy, which is innate to human beings that have innate empathy and have to live together. It doesn't come from some command, right? That's
quite
not morality.
obviously. I think
Yeah,
if you interact with children for a few minutes, you can kind of see that. You can see that they
yeah,
have a sense of right and wrong, and it clearly doesn't come from some deep philosophical understanding of what they believe religiously, because
yeah.
that's just, I don't know if it's really totally possible for
And
them.
obviously, something like hell is one of the worst ideas you can have, and it divides people, and it's going to forever divide people. Whenever you have some claim that's exclusive like that, and you can't demonstrate it to other people, and they have their competing claims. That's why, like the United Nations in 1948 had the Declaration of Human Rights that had no mention of religion in it, and that's the kind of thing that's going to bring humanity together, shared human principles, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah. I've actually noticed, I know it's kind of off topic, but I've noticed a lot of what's happening in Ukraine. Every time I've heard Zelensky speak, I've been sort of, I've been impressed with how he seems to really kind of make these emotional pleas and these, these really bold statements that are very powerful in nature. But I haven't heard him reference a god at all. And I doubt that there's any other, or not too many other world leaders who would be
every
doing
time
that.
I turn on the news and I see something in Ukraine, they not him, but the people of Ukraine are always referencing God.
I'm sure
I
the
take it as a
people
very
too.
religious
Yeah.
place. So,
I'm just saying, as far as for a leader to be,
right, yeah,
because I mean, Obama's politics are not exactly my politics, but he's obviously a far better president than Trump.
yeah.
And it would disappoint me a lot of times when I was a kid that he would not push back against things like the National Prayer Breakfast, and
Mm.
he would say,
His parents were secular. They were. His mom was a secular humanist. His dad was an atheist. So they were
oh, I don't
secular.
believe he was religious, but I believe that it's a bold thing for a world leader to try to unite their people in an emotional and, you know, sort of sentimental way without using God. I think Zelensky to me is proving it's possible. So not to say that the people of Ukraine aren't religious, and you know, power to them right now. If that's what they need, then that's
Right.
what they have. But so I guess to me, it is powerful because as someone who studied politics and who studies sociology, um, the idea that people would sooner elect pretty much anybody over an atheist is, you know,
In
frustrating.
America, that's in America, definitely, but not necessarily in other
Yeah,
countries. Like
yeah.
in Argentina, there was a guy, Jose Mujica, I think was his name, who was an atheist. He was like the president or prime minister, and he was a really good leader. Also in Spain, I think the prime minister there is an atheist. And other countries are majority atheists, obviously, like Scandinavia, parts of Asia,
Oh yeah,
not the
no,
bad
I
parts, the communist
specifically
ones, but
talking about
yeah,
America,
yeah,
where
yeah.
unfortunately, if I wanted to have a career in politics, it would probably be here. Um,
Yeah,
but
that's ridiculous.
yeah, it would be really good to see in our lifetimes America kind of catch up to the rest of the modern world, and I guess that's one of the things that has gone into my desire to study politics and sociology, right? So that I can
Well,
understand that and then maybe use that.
yeah, I think that's kind of awesome that you are getting into that because I mean I could see that you doing some positive change there. I mean you were 15 or 16 and you were just you were on national TV and you were litigating this. You took a stand when back before. Well, I guess it was after kind of the new atheist thing started, but still it was a it
Around
was a
then.
big it was a big stand to take, and you took a lot of conviction and courage and guts and everything else. And it was it was impressive. I mean, for real, very impressive. So,
I'm sorry that my
yeah,
cat's jumping around making all this noise, but no,
yeah,
thank you. Yeah, it's been long enough now for me to kind of look back and actually see myself as a kid. Like, you know, when I was doing what I did, most teenagers don't want to think of themselves as being kids still.
right.
And so people would constantly say, like, you know, that was a lot. You went through a lot. And I would kind of brush it off. And I mean, I would acknowledge it, but I would
What was it that
still
that one
be
politician called you? Dirty, dirty little something,
evil
dirty
little
little thing,
thing, evil
evil little
little
thing.
thing. Yeah.
Oh wow,
Yeah, that was
yeah,
my nickname, but it backfired. I mean, we used that to print T-shirts, and the
yeah,
proceeds went to a scholarship for me. I mean, they they were trying their hardest to
yeah.
vilify a teenage girl who was standing up for her First Amendment rights, and they failed in every possible way. And so, you know, again, it was hard for me to sort of see it for what it was when it was happening to me in real time. Now that I've sort of taken a step back, sort of had a chance to recover from some of the trauma and just like, you know, there was a lot. There was a lot. I think at the time I wouldn't even probably have been willing to admit that I was traumatized by a lot of what happened. But I was 100%. How could you not be when you're having your life threatened on a daily basis? You're going to school wondering if people are going to try to attack you. I mean, I was
Can't
reading
even imagine.
comments daily. I mean, whether it was someone saying something, you know, really violent or just criticizing me to my or lying about something that I had said. I would see posts that were talking about how I was going to buy a new car with all the money I was getting from suing my city, and I didn't have my license. I didn't get any money from the city. We had to ask for $25. That's the minimum you can ask for in damages. And I still
Mm,
have the check. I never cashed it because I would rather have that piece of paper than 25 bucks.
okay.
So, and that was, I, as a 16-year-old, asked my lawyers to please not make money the issue. And it didn't
Yeah.
matter. People still went online and lied about me, like buying all this stuff, saying that they were in my classes. It was so frustrating. And it was everything I could do not to respond to everything angrily. When you're in a court case, you're not really allowed to just say whatever you want when you want to say it,
Right.
because that can get used in discovery. I had everything that I'd ever said or done on the internet. Basically, I had to print it out and give it to the city's attorneys. Um,
Yeah.
and I know it probably sounds like I would not advise people to do something similar to what I did, but I absolutely would. I think that it's like a totally different climate now. And I think that even
Yeah.
then I would have advised people to do it if they were willing to, if they wanted to. Um, because the support, I haven't really talked much about the support, but I
Yeah.
mean, at the time that this happened, it was a really big story within the secular community. And I have had so many things that I'm incredibly grateful for, like opportunities to meet people and speak at events and travel. And it's some of the most rewarding experiences of my life, I'm sure. So you have to take the bad with the good, I guess.
Yep, that's life, right? But I would say overall progress has been made, and I don't think it's inaccurate to say you were some part of that, the stand you took. So, yeah, I definitely
I'm
encourage other
okay.
people to, if they can, to you know take similar stance that need to be taken. So definitely,
Oh yeah. And I think there's also just probably more of an awareness too today,
yeah,
that these issues do matter. So I mean, if the same thing happened again, if this were somehow happening right now in 2022, I think there would be more support even. I mean, I had a lot of support, but I think it would
I think so.
be even more.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, again, Jessica, thank you so much for being on.
Thank
It's
you.
fascinating, and again, I applaud the stance you took. I think it mattered. So, yeah, hopefully, we'll keep moving forward in the right direction. Right.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. All right. But thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Yeah.
Foresight paradigm, fine. A foresight paradigm, foresight paradigm, you fine. A foresight paradigm, I fight for sight.